Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Wednesday, June 25th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's choosing to join us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Rice on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. The book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files from that web page of shows just like this one, where people have called in and been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them, even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It also contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we would greatly appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, and or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. Alternatively, you can join us live through Zoom, and you can either call in and use our meeting ID number, or you can open a browser window and type in our meeting ID, which is coming up here somewhere. Or you can go to the mindshiftersacademy.org website, and there is a page there for our meeting ID. The meeting ID through Zoom for this call is 853-2357-4173. That's 853-2357-4173. And you can join us through your phone or through the internet. You can choose to share your video or not, or just talk to us voice to voice. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody chooses to do that, because it makes it so much easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be a service, and that is just boatloads easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you, how our discussions or book reviews or reading of books with commentaries or discussion about interviews that I have done on the On Your Mind podcast hosted by Journey's Dream, or interviewees that we have live on Mind Shifters Radio, etc. And we had a support group last night, and we had one brand new person, actually somebody that I met briefly out at Guy Finley's Life of Learning Foundation, who happens to live here in Illinois, up in northwest suburb. And she joined for a while before she had to go, and then we had a number of our regulars that were not able to attend last night. So we just had discussion and question and answer. And so that is really the meat and potatoes of this work, is when somebody calls and asks a question. Somebody asks for clarification or assistance in using a worksheet, or clarification of support for any of the number of tools. Last night, because we had somebody who hadn't been here before, we were reviewing some of the other tools. The primary tool in this work is the reality management worksheet. And yet a number of people haven't been around long enough to know that there are a host of other tools, including the 3 Early Memories of Conflict tool, and the Mind Shifter targeted journaling tool, and the Mind Goal Management worksheet, the Codependence to Interdependence worksheet, etc. So any of your questions about any of those tools would be valuable. And we welcome the questions, even if at some point in time I seem to be in the middle of a monologue, or I seem to be in the middle of reading something. It's strongly recommended that you put up a hand and ask a question. Every question and comment, even if it's a refutation of something we're saying, is viewed by us as additive, as increasing the probability that whatever happens during this next hour of radio show will be worthy of replay or get labeled as a highlight, best of show, etc. So, how can we be of support to you? I'm just in my kind of re-entry phase here at work, after having been gone for all of last week and Friday before and Monday of this week. So I'm supposing that if I don't get a hand raised or somebody asking a question directly, that people are um, interested in me going back to the reading of A Walk in the Physical by Christian Sundberg, and the Q&A section of that book that we were dealing with before I left for my trip. I was really struck by the similarities of several of the different teachers that people mentioned when I was out at the Guy Finley talks, and I think I mentioned a little bit yesterday. There was a very good friend of mine from graduate school that I connected with while I was out in Oregon, and he had several of the same, well, I'll call them areas of interest and study. And yet, rather than being able to do what Rilke calls us to, which is to live in the question without demanding an answer, and to just do what the way of mastery would call us to, which is to rest in and get comfortable exploring our divine ignorance, how in truth we don't know what anything is or is for, and we don't truly know what any of our brothers and sisters need. And yet, if we're willing to live in that questioning state, if we're willing to ask to be shown or ask to be taught by life, things start to unfold in a way that none of us could predict with our extraordinarily limited, what we call conscious logical mind. So, to get back to the walk in the physical book, and the questions, uh, again, I like to remind us that before he gets into this third section of his book, Christian reminds us that he considers himself a very flawed and floundering student of the spiritual truths, and he does not pretend to have all the answers. And he feels as though he's called to share some of the questions and answers that he's been given by his teachers. And so, with that in mind, here's a question he's trying to answer. The question is, I have trouble having close relationships with people in this life. If I'm the same person after I die, will I continue to have trouble connecting with others in the next life? And the answer that Christian Sundberg gives is, in the non-physical, interactions are much more genuine and communication is full and known. Exchanges take place through telepathy, by which no misunderstanding is possible. You have very dear relationships with many, many, many people, and they with you, or entities, and they with you, even if you have forgotten those relationships while being human. Those beings love you for exactly who you really are, no pretenses required. They know you in a way that you may have never known or been known by anyone while you're human. When freed from the constraints of a reality system like ours, you will have no problem connecting with them. Meanwhile, if you have interactions with others where their nature and yours are dissimilar in some way, that is no problem at all. You might naturally just not spend time together, but there is no social pretense whatsoever. Love and understanding are commonplace, and everyone's true, unique nature is recognized and valued. So fear not, fear not, fear not. The next category of questions is titled Heaven. And the first question is heaven a real place? And Christian's answer is yes. There are numerous reality systems of such creative expression, beauty, and bliss that you could not possibly articulate them with human language or even imagine them with the human mind. Beingness itself is always full of bliss, freedom, and love because it is enduring, it is its enduring true nature. What is? Beingness has as its true nature bliss, freedom, and love because that is just what it is. And it expresses that nature through incredible reality systems that are overflowing with those qualities of bliss, freedom, and love. The next question is, where is heaven located? Christian writes, this may be a useful metaphor. Imagine you sit down at your computer to play a video game. However, as you play this game, you completely forget the, quote, real world, close quotes, and only remember and know about the video game world. Then later, while still in the video game world, as your character in the game, you ask, quote, where in our video game world is the real world? Close quotes. The question cannot be answered because the real world is a higher dimension that is giving rise to the video game world. So it is with heaven. We are already there, but we are metaphorically asleep as we walk through this human journey, and we can never, ever be far from heaven. The next question is heaven a state of mind? And Christian writes, a positive, selfless, appreciative, and loving state of mind automatically moves us into a vibration that is more in alignment with joy and love that we already fundamentally are. That feels heavenly. Also, that joy and love that we already fundamentally are manifests places, he has in parentheses here, reality systems, close parentheses, that are of unspeakable beauty, creativity, and bliss. So, quote, heaven, close quotes, is both possible to know in a given relatively high constraint reality system such as our own, and also within other reality systems that are, quote, higher up, close quotes. And those higher up reality systems are much less constraining. In other words, they have very different rule sets. Here we have rule sets like height and weight and gravity and time and verbal speech. In other realities, they don't have those constraints. Time isn't linear. Height and weight aren't considerations. There's no physical body the way we experience a physical body here, etc. And those different reality sets and systems are already vibrationally much, quote, closer, close quotes, to what our true nature actually is. He writes, simultaneously, however, no explicit reality systems are even required in order for us to experience the bliss of being, capital B, being your true nature is imbued with, is infused with, is woven through with bliss. So to put that another way, joy is native to what we are, and that joy can be expressed or known in many different reality systems to varying degrees, and even beyond them. So in other words, and the other disclaimer that he puts in front of these questions is, and at the beginning of the book is, we're talking about things that go way, way beyond anything that speech can communicate. Just like so many of the experiences I had when I went on this trip last week just can't be put into words. So please try to remember that as you're listening to these questions and answers, if some part of you gets tight or tense or wants to argue against it, begin by breathing and softening and turning the focus inside and asking yourself, gee, how am I creating such resistance? And then in quick order after that, negativity in response to some thoughts and questions and answers, just some speculation, right? How is it that I'm using that as an excuse to generate tightness and tension or confusion or hurt? So begin there and understand as we try to remind each other on a regular basis that everything about my experience in life right now is created through the process of my choosing how to interpret and respond to whatever is coming at me and whatever I'm experiencing internally. So the next category for questions and answers is titled Hell. And the first question is, how there can be a hell or hellish experiences. Surely these exist. How can we explain this? And Christian writes, the unconditional source, capital S source, of love transcends all the reality experiences of form. However, within experiences of form, in parentheses, whether in this reality or others, close parentheses, great contrast is possible. When we go what we would call far from source, we can experience great fear. Where there is fear, quote, darkness, close quotes, happens. In parentheses, he writes, ego, selfishness, greed, etc. This arises when fear is present, close parentheses. He goes on, we are powerful creative beings. And so, whether it's in this physical reality or in other more thought-responsive realities, we can create hellish experiences due to our fear and because of our beliefs and expectations. All of that, however, is contained within the great transcendent, capital B, beingness that gives rise to it all. In other words, the unconditional love is first. And then within that love, there are even given the opportunity, we are even given the opportunity to experience environments of stark contrast in this and even other reality systems, some of which can be hellish until we evolve past that fear and expand the love and joy in due measure. So as I was reading that, my mind was also feeding up thoughts about how when I am 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years old, and I have desires and I have preferences for, sweet foods or quiet time or to be left alone to play without interruption or to be left alone to just go to sleep. And my parent, loving, gentle, understands it's a good time for me to, let's say, take a nap rather than play and play and play until I get overtired. Or they decide, it's a good time for me to have a bath before I go to bed. Or it's a good time for me to eat a healthy food rather than a sugary snack. Or maybe I'm a few years older and my parent decides it's a good time for me to go away to a kindergarten or a first grade class. And I have such a lovely home life and, pleasant parents and siblings that I don't really want to go out and meet other people and be around other kids that can be various levels of angry and frustrated, etc. But my loving, gentle, far more understanding parent sees that it's part of my healthy growth to go through something that I don't really want to go through. That's what flashed in my mind when I was reading that last question and answer. How can there be hell? How can there be hellish experiences?
I have a story about that. It's so good to see you back. Just so good to see you back.
Thank you.
Um,
Welcome. And this
yeah,
and this is Sally.
Yeah, Sally here.
right?
Um, I had a experience last night. I love the what you read. So much of it I want to write down, but I just write it in my mind because I'm either at the gym or right now I'm in the car. Or, I'm trying to do. I want to do this show like it's the priority of my day, regardless of where I am and what I'm doing. So it's working. And I'm so grateful for your time, talent, and every single experience, all the readings, and you just find gems. And so, that said, last night I went to see James Taylor play, and I've been playing his music since I was probably 12 to maybe 16. 16, I got my first guitar. And so I loved going and hearing him again. And he comes to this place called Blossom Music Center, which is a huge amphitheater in Cleveland, huge. And it's kind of his home venue. He loves being there. And I had that beingness experience all through the night. And it was so fun to I was around a bunch of people that it was 95 degrees and no wind and high humidity. So
Wow.
that sets the stage for this massive amphitheater with probably 30 to 40,000 people minimum. And so I just was, like everyone else, sweating and experiencing the need to hydrate myself and others. And at one point, I kept witnessing other people's fear come up or demands or various things, when, as Michael says, when the stress is up and the chips are down, or there's a perception of that, uh, old behavior shows up. And I was watching that happen for the group I was with, and especially, but I'll get to the point. I had to go to the bathroom at one point, and I thought, there's a long line, and so I'm patiently waiting it, but not waiting, just breathing, and in that being, just staying in the being, and then we get inside the bathroom, and there's all these sinks, and I decided, well, let's see, what's more important, go to the bathroom or go to the sink? And my whole body said, go to the sink. And so I went to the sink and I started splashing water on myself, kind of like a bird. And pretty soon the women got out of line and came over, and I chatted with the woman next to me. And I said, when I was bringing a tourist group of Spanish motorcycle riders through Death Valley, and it was 115 or something, I said, I had the job of making sure they didn't die. And so I just was telling this gal that what worked the best was just splashing each other. So I flicked her with the water and she flicked me back. And pretty soon another gal came over. She flicks another woman. Well, 4 minutes later, the five of us at the sinks, our hair was wet, our faces were wet, we were laughing hysterically. And when we came out of the bathroom, everybody was looking at us like, what are you doing in there? And that made us laugh even harder. It was such a moment of beingness. And it just reminded me of the miracle of when you stay in the beingness. There's something that shows up. It's like it creates the holy ground for miracles. And I certainly had no intention of having a miracle in the bathroom. I just wanted,
But they can happen anywhere.
yeah, I just wanted to, take care of myself in, knowing to go before the show. And it was just a night all like that. Then a big storm comes and lightning and, you know, 40,000 people parked on grass. It was just an interesting thing to stay in beingness. And Christian Sundberg, he just has a way, I can't even describe it. almost every word that is written that you've read and you read so beautifully is uh, so gold to my heart. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome and deserving. I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
And congratulations on this practice of instead of here, I have this plan. And my plan is I'm going to the bathroom and I need to go to the bathroom and just use the bathroom and get out of there. But
Mm-hmm.
you're in there and you stop and you say, now there's another option here. What should I do now? Right? What just asking. And one of the weirdest things for me, because my father was a mechanical engineer and my mother was an exceedingly logical person who actually got thrown out of her high school logic class for being too logical. And so I had that in my roots, right? To be at that conscious, what we call logical level. And it was so weird for me to encounter a teaching that said, the way Rilke does, learn to live in a questioning state without demanding an answer. When I first
Yes.
encountered that, I probably read that for 2 or 3 years in different ways. I had different people that I would read who would quote Rilke, and I would go back to that and think, what the heck does that mean? I couldn't even comprehend it because I was so, well, I'll call it indoctrinated to the idea of ask a question and find the solution, find the answer, and don't give up until you have the answer kind of thing. But there's this other state, this kind of receptivity that is available when I and these days when I'm doing this, I take my right hand and put it over my forehead and say, I'm going to take my conscious logical mind and I scoop it out and I kind of place it over to the right and I say, put that on the bookshelf for now. Not because it's bad, not because it's wrong, just because it's a very limited tool, right? If I'm doing some projects around the house that require some working with wood, I'm not going to use the hammer at every stage of that woodworking. I'm not going to use a hacksaw at every stage, although I might use it at some stage to cut off a bent nail or something. But this conscious logical mind, instead of being, as Einstein said, this faithful servant, the problem is we've been raised in a culture that's forgotten the precious gift, which is the intuitive mind, and we've raised the faithful servant to the level of master. And so when I encountered this Rilke quote and this concept, I was lost. I didn't know what to make of it. And eventually over time, it started to make sense to me to just soften and use my programmed ability to bring on that parasympathetic response rather than um, continue to hack away at trying to make an answer appear with my conscious logical mind. And so
Yes.
it opened this whole way of literally living life that
Yes.
when I mention it to people, if they ask me about it, they think that's just woo-woo garbage. I mean, this guy is going to he's going to be blown around like a dried up leaf in the wind. And as soon as I say that, I think about the bachelor button and the dandelion. And this story came to me a number of times when I was at Guy Finley's intensive center, or he's not intensive center, Life of Learning Foundation, because as he starts this story about the bachelor button and the dandelion, he says, "So do everybody know what a bachelor button is?" and there's rumbling, and then people start laughing, and he says, well, that's not the funny part. And then he stops and he says, there's nothing worse than talking to spiritual people. And there's a chuckle and a ripple through the audience. And then he gets back to the story. He says, so there's a bachelor button, which is a little flower, and it's sitting next to a dandelion. And the bachelor button starts to get all nervous and worried. And the dandelion says, what's the matter? And the bachelor button says, well, I'm just so nervous and worried for you. Aren't you nervous? Aren't you worried? And the dandelion says, why? And the bachelor button says, well, because you're going to go all white, and then a wind is going to come by and it's going to blow you all over the place. Aren't you worried? And the dandelion said, not at all. How could that be? Says the bachelor button. And the dandelion says, because each breeze, each change in the wind takes me exactly where I need to be. And the absolute idiocy of that to the conscious, logical, Western trained mind can't be denied. It just sounds like gibberish. And yet, here we have, as Michael Singer talks about, this universe we're living in, as far as our physical scientists can tell us, it's been 13.84 billion years in the making, and everything about your body and every piece of matter that you touch came from stars being born and giving up their life and dying and forming atoms and helium atoms and then hydrogen atoms and all the different elements have been forged in the stars over the years. So there's a simple way to look at this that says everything that unfolds in your life today has been 13.84 billion years in the making. And it's really kind of silly for you to think that your conscious logical mind can experience what's happening and say this is bad or wrong. So it from a purely logical sense, if you step back and see the bigger view, it makes a lot more sense to say whatever is unfolding in life is perfect just the way it is, and it makes more sense for me to be in the middle of it and ask, how can I add a loving, nurturing energy flow from the the little bit of this flow of creation that I have dominion over, which is my conscious logical mind and how I choose to interpret and respond to the flow of life, it makes more logical sense if you step back and and take into account this flow of life and creation. But if you're sitting here thinking, well, my logic is the right, and I've been trained at MIT, and I know this and that, and that, then it doesn't make any sense to say, well, I'm going to ask a question and not demand an answer, but live in that questioning state and go with the flow.
Amen.
I met somebody at the Guy Finley Center that is was a physicist trained at MIT, and we had lunch across the table from him, and I was able to talk to him about how it was only a few years ago that I discovered what people had known for generations was that MIT is not just this hard, rigid, logical, really bright, ultra bright genius type person. It's a place where the really bright genius type people who lean towards wild creativity go, right? It's it's not like Caltech or NASA, where these people are, always looking at numbers and logic and trying to crunch everything down. This is um, this is a place where they invite people like Jacob Collier. Do you know Jacob Collier?
I know of.
Well, if you know of Jacob Collier, then you probably would benefit by going to the YouTube and typing in Jacob Collier MIT. And there's this wonderful half-hour video about how they invited him to go to MIT and work with their music students because he's such a creative genius. And it's it's glorious, right? These brilliant people who are introduced to somebody who has this off the chart level of creativity in music. And so a lot of the
Yeah.
people that are in MIT, they're not just number crunching people. They also have the ability to crunch the numbers and to be musicians or artists in various ways. So that's a lovely sidebar note for anybody who
Thank
wants
you.
to check out the YouTube and just type in Jacob Collier, Collier, and MIT. And there's a half an hour video about it's kind of a little documentary about what happened when they invited him to work with their
Hmm.
music students and their orchestra.
Sounds good. Thank you. Nice.
Okay, any other comments or questions from you?
Not at this moment. I love listening. I love listening.
All right, I will go back to the question and answer from uh, Christian Sundberg. And did I already read Is Hell Real? Yeah, I think I read that one. Well, I'll just recap. The question is asked, is hell real? And Christian writes, temporary, hellish reality experiences can happen both in other non-physical realities and also here on Earth. The highly constraining Earth experience is sometimes perceived as a hell, not because it's fundamentally charged, but because of the meanings that physical beings' incarnate consciousness has placed upon it and bought into about it. Now, as soon as I say that, I think about, I just finished this 10 days of travel. And because of the work I've been training myself to do with Michael Rice's and a lot of other people's work for the last 20, 25, 30 years, whatever it is, where I've literally been making it a daily practice to notice the earliest warning signs of tightness or tension or upset in me. And then soften and breathe and turn inside and just ask to be shown how this can turn out to be a blessing or how it could turn out better than I imagined, et cetera, et cetera. Or how to be a blessing to myself and others in a tight or tense or difficult situation. Because I've been practicing that so much, I did that a lot on this vacation. And if you've done any traveling and been in and out of some major airports, you understand that that many people moving around, that many moving parts, that many different schedules, that many different machines and vehicles and people's lives that can have twists and turns in them that people don't always appreciate is a ripe, fertile field for people to generate upset and blame it on the flow of life. And I watched a lot of people be in the very same situation I was in the moment and be upset or be scared or be confused. And I had the benefit of these couple of decades or more of active working with these tools. And at the first instance of some kind of tightness in me, apply the breathing technique and relax and soften and ask to be shown a different way to look at this. And I stayed in that calm flow state about 98% of the entire 12 days we were gone. Not the case for people that I saw driving around me, racing by at the airports, getting angry at people in the airport shuttles, at the restaurants where we had stopped. It was so clear how people in the physical realm giving meaning to their circumstances generate so much that they don't like and appreciate that they would call hellish. And that's what he says here. Temporary, hellish reality experiences can happen right here on Earth as well as in other reality systems that are not physical. He writes, non-physical environments are often thought responsive. Meaning, you think you want something this way and it just becomes that way. And these non-physical environments will instantly reflect the personal nature and the personal beliefs of the experiencer in an extremely real way. Also, sometimes a quote hell, close quotes, is experienced as a quote wake up call, close quotes. It's a way to get someone's attention and show them that they're on a path of fear or selfishness that they don't need to stay on because we have choice. One of the examples that comes to mind is I, I I was traveling with a partner, and when we got to Seattle, the Seattle airport is notorious among seasoned travelers as one of the worst airports that they have to visit in their travels, all through the US and outside the US. And the reasons for that are many and varied. But what it leads to is a lot of rushing and then waiting, and then rushing and then waiting, and then rushing, rushing, rushing so you don't miss your plane, or rushing, rushing, rushing so you don't miss the next trolley, even though the next one's going to be by in 10 minutes. So when we got to our location, we needed a shuttle from the airport, from the hotel to the airport, and vice versa, however it went. And in Seattle, it seemed everyone we asked about how to make that happen had a different answer, and they were conflicting. So it ended up being about an hour and a half of waiting. And my partner was, steam coming out the ears and frustration, and this isn't right, and I'm going to write to that hotel, we're paying all enough money for this, etc. And I would just take a breath and say, we're in a climate controlled environment. We know where we're going to go eventually. We have the blessing of having enough money to pay for a cab if we need it, et cetera, et cetera. And she would soften and come down. But here's the idea that if I don't buy into the thought process that offers itself from my old habits in the past or what I might have learned from my family of origin, if I don't buy into it, it doesn't create the disruption in my life. This is the Byron Katie work. She says, it's not that every negative thought she has causes her to suffer. She realizes that she only suffers when she believes her negative thoughts. And so we could choose, and this is the offering in this work, we can choose to experience every little quote hell, close quotes, every little tightness and tension and negative thought. We can choose to use it as a wake-up call to help us realize, oh, as Michael Rice has in his worksheet process, if I'm in pain, my thoughts are in error. And the good news here is I have the dominion over where I focus my thought energy. I have the ability to choose a more loving, a more compassionate, a more safe set of interpretations and responses to this moment, the way it's unfolding, than what my mind was just serving up to me. Another example that comes to mind is we'd had a very long travel day on Monday because um, Seattle is 2 hours behind us. So we're actually going to get up at what would be 3 o'clock in the morning, the Midwest time, and lose 2 hours during the flight time, and then get to O'Hare, which is a much easier to navigate airport than Seattle. But still, there's a lot going on there. And so when we finally got um, onto a shuttle, which had all kinds of, we had a shuttle bus driver who kept telling us his wasn't the right shuttle. And it was. So we had to wait until he went back to the hotel and then came around again. When we finally got on the shuttle and we had to run for the shuttle and blah, 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 I'm sitting in the very front seat and we squeezed in as the last two people that could fit in this shuttle. And my partner is sitting like 2 or 3 rows behind me. And I hear her call out, "Do you have my purse?" And I didn't have her purse. I had never had her purse. She hadn't given me her purse to hold. It was so now I'm sitting in the front of this shuttle. It's got about 15 other people in it, and I'm strapped in, and he's in heavy traffic heading away from the airport, where if she doesn't have her purse, her her purse is sitting back at the airport, and there's no word coming from her. And the thoughts came rushing up to me, oh boy, is she going to be inconsolable if she's misplaced her purse? And then I just breathed and I softened and I just kept asking Ruka to guide this and let me, unfold as it needs to unfold. And my mind was going through, but what if she, and I just kept calming myself down with those thoughts and that breath. I didn't feel the need to go into a full-blown EFT tapping session, but I would have if I'd felt the need. That's an example of one of the many times on this trip where my mind wanted to serve up warning, Will Robinson, danger, run away. And I simply wouldn't go there. We ended up driving the 15 or 20 minutes to the hotel. And as we got out of the van, she had her purse around her neck. And I said, "I see you found your purse." And she said, "Yep." And when we were alone driving to the next stop, I said, "Just so you know, in the future, it would benefit me if you ask me, 'Do I have your purse?' And then I say no. When you eventually find it, that you let me know. It'd be a little easier on my system. It'd be a little easier to recover from the negative thought process." She chuckled. So here, as we consider to finish the question from Christian, is hell real? The second paragraph here says, none of those hellish experiences are true in a fundamental way. The fundamental capital B beingness that gives rise to all experience, that fundamental beingness is made of this stuff we call love and joy and freedom. It ventures from that state into these things that we experience as discrete experiences, even what may end up being potentially a hellish experience, but it does so ultimately for the sake of creativity, joy, and love, for the sake of just playing around and experiencing contrast. He writes, non-fundamental, hellish experiences may occur as we wield fear-based intent. In parentheses, he writes, intent that reflects the illusion of separation, close parentheses. But these non-fundamental, temporary, hellish experiences do not last because they're not fundamentally real. And just as the earth environment is not fundamentally real, the experience we have is real, but the beingness that's having the experience is far more real. And the beingness is always rooted in love, freedom, and joy. It reminds me of Guy Finley's little mini poem where he says, the feel is real. The feelings you have are real. The why is a lie. Your mind is telling you that you're sad or scared or upset because you can't find your purse and maybe it's lost, etc. But that's not really why you're feeling the tightness or the tension or the fear. You're only feeling the tightness or tension or the fear because you've chosen to believe that this might have happened and that even if it did happen, it's going to be horrible and terrible and expensive, et cetera, et cetera. And you pour your mind energy into that thought pattern. That's what generates your negativity, your negative emotional state, your fear, your tension, your anger, your shame, etc. So we're down to about 4 minutes. I'm not going to attempt to read another question and answer, and we have some time for comment or question from someone we haven't heard from yet today. And just as an example of how the 9-bit automatic mind works, I almost just gave a phone number. So the echoes of that fundamental thinking are still there. So it looks like so Linda has unmuted. Are you offering a thought?
Yes, I am. I like Sally, appreciation for what you continue the conversation on, not only for what you said before Sally spoke, but this is really relevant. I appreciate your elaborating on what Christian has been writing. It's been very helpful. Your personal stories are extremely helpful because I can relate to them. I can resonate with them. And I appreciate the encouragement to breathe and ask to be shown at the slightest sense of tension. So my practice is to realize when I'm in the slightest sense of tension and proceed at that point. It's all a practice, isn't it, Tim? Dr.
Well,
Tim.
it has been for me, right? And Tim is fine. The doctor part is for other people to worry about. But the idea is, for me, it was a very, I think I've mentioned this before that I was in a Michael Rice seminar and I had this kind of a explosion in my brain that would be like some people would call it a spiritual awakening. But I woke up 2 or 3 days later with the full-blown realization that I needed to put that practice into my life every day. And now it's been, 20 some years of practicing most days quite consciously to identify and take action at the first hint of negativity in my energetic experience. And so that's what's been at the root of what I would call tremendous success that I've experienced using these tools.
I really especially appreciate asking the question. I'm very slow and methodical in my way of being. It's the most comfortable for me. Larry's very quick. I'm very detailed. He's very overview, and both of us get lost in our own sides. And to notice more subtly, to notice more. Notice sooner my more and more subtle ways of judging how he should be or how I should be, especially how I should be. I really appreciate that, asking the question and adding on the noticing the slightest bit of tension. I appreciate that, and thank you for that gift.
Well, you're very welcome and deserving. Thanks for being here on the show. And I will remind us all that we come from love. We're made of this stuff we call love. We actually